I'm only human, I do what I can. I'm just a man, I do what I can. Don't put the blame on me. Don't put your blame on me.
Hi, my name is Jim Sheehy and this is reallyhuman.ie. And today we're going to talk about men, and all are invited to listen in, by the way, ladies, but it's mainly focused and directed at you men, okay? The metaphor, or the way I like to see men, is men in the mountain. It kind of gives me a sense of where men might be at in today's world, because I think a lot of men find that life is like that. It's like climbing a mountain. We do it alone sometimes, we do it as a member of a team. But one thing that all so-called mountaineers have in common is that they always need what we call a base camp. A base camp is probably the most crucial thing that a mountaineer has to have, because a base camp contains a whole lot of stuff. So men, in terms of life's journey, need their base camp. What do I mean by that? Well, first of all, when you talk about a base camp, you're obviously talking about shelter. So if there's storms and avalanches further up, you can retreat back into the shelter of the base camp. What's our base camp as men? Well, I suppose it starts when we're boys and moving on then. It's around the shelter of family, it's around the shelter of school, it's around the shelter of community. Depending on the quality and the standard of your base camp, the rest of your journey could be pretty tricky, or it'll be reliable and straightforward. So that idea of the base camp as a shelter is very important. The base camp is also where you either have or do not have a sense of communication and confidence, a sense of motivation, a sense of purpose. In other words, have you a reason to get up in the morning? Have you the voice to say what you need to say? Do you carry a sense of confidence into your work, into your relationship, and so forth like that? The base camp also says it contains usually the medical resources, so that if you're ever in big trouble up the mountain, you can go back to it. So what are we talking about there? Well, there will be crises, as you know, along the journey. Maybe 360 days of the 365 are pretty normal. Maybe 5 days out of the 365 days of the year are crises. And crises are transition points, they're stepping stones, they're invitations, doorways into which we are invited to say, where are we when we went into this crisis? What's happening? What do we find out about ourselves as we go through the crisis? And who is the guy that actually emerges on the other side? So those 5 days could be crucial in who you are as a man. And the last thing we talk about in the base camp are resources. In other words, it's kind of a network of supports that you have in terms of people, in terms of activities you do, in terms of any bunch of stuff. Your relationship with nature, your resources regarding what hobbies you have and so forth. It's a huge area, and we talk in detail a lot about these. But that overall is your base camp. Before you ascend the mountain of life, that base camp needs to be in good shape. What are we really talking about when a man comes into a room, into my therapy room? Very often what they are poking around at is their own, what we call identity. A very kind of an old term, I know. But what is identity? Identity is basically where they're saying, I haven't a clue who I am. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's happening around me. I can't understand what's going on in my head. My feelings are all over the joint. My behaviours can't predict what's going to happen next. And usually come back to identity. Who am I? And they have to go on a journey to find out who they are. Very often men, and not only men but women also, they often confuse identity as being in a role. Like, I'll give you a typical example that often walks in the door. We Irish are very good at caring, okay? We're great carers. But if you, for example, are the oldest child of maybe 5 children, okay? Then you often become the carer for the bottom 2 children. And you suddenly realise that your main reason for being around is because of your ability and your value as a carer. So later on, when the young girl, for example, or the young man becomes an adult, they suddenly find themselves a bit fed up with this caring that they were well used to for a long time, did the trick for a long time, but now it doesn't work anymore. So when it comes to identity, going as a man on this journey of who am I, what am I about can often go back to being a boy, your relationship with your own father, family, community, and school. Okay? Men often suffer a huge amount of, a serious lack of confidence when it comes to themselves. So I want to give men a sense of, you are one of a tribe. We men often put ourselves down, or even the media can sometimes put us down, as being stereotyped and classified as whatever, wasters, losers, not reliable, not consistent. We also need to know that apart from that being part of our story, we are also very confident and proud of our history as men. Even social history, we need to see ourselves as what have we done. So we men are pioneers, for example. We're very good at exploring. We are dig deep when we're passionate and look into something, whether it's art, science, exploration, achievement, or of any description. We historically have found ourselves to be extremely good, and that's in you, the person looking at this video. We are also excellent at producing. Anything to do with, farming, hunting, machine software. We're constantly producing stuff that is new, exciting, dynamic. We are good at this, and we need to find it. And if it's lacking, you need to find that part of you that is a man, that is part of your DNA. And finally, we're very good at protecting. Now, when I talk about protecting, we usually talk about family first, that men can be depended upon, that when push comes to shove, it brings out the best in us. Also in terms of even our country and so forth like that. Tír Rá, the love of country. It can bring out the best of us when it's done in the right way. Okay? I want to move on quickly to what today's man is about, as opposed to, say, our fathers and even our grandfathers. Today's man, in today's world, is in a very different zone than our fathers and grandfathers. Look at the area of relationship. Okay? What's happening inside as well as happening outside our skin is equally important today. Our fathers and grandfathers were pretty much all on the outside. What they produced, what they put on the dinner table, how much money they brought home, and so forth like that. Today, men have to be really good at feeling world, thinking world, communicating world. Guys, you have to wake up, smell the coffee. This is the world we live in. Communication, for example, if you've got a child or a teenager, you as a man, as a father, you have to be damn good at communicating. You have to really know the world of feelings. You have to know what's going on inside their heads if they express anything like anxiety or depression or something like that. You have to be in there with them. So you have to do this work on yourself first in order to do it with your children. Look at the area of equality. Like if you look at the area of partnership, for example, you're talking about finance, you're talking about opportunity, you're talking about custody even of children. So in this area of sharing our world with women, we have to get really good at this area of equality. And sometimes we are a bit clumsy around this area. There is rights and wrongs on both sides. Women have to do their work, we men have to do our work. And we meet then, having done our own work, and say, okay, what is our rights, what are our needs in this area of finance, custody and opportunity and so forth like that. And finally, in the area of flexibility. Like you might take, for example, our dads and our granddads, maybe one job for the whole of their lives. Today, you could have 2, 3, 4 jobs in a lifetime, okay? Even in relationship. Today, it's not abnormal to have 1, 2 or 3 key relationships in your life rather than the one stable relationship our parents or grandparents had. So, inflexible doesn't work for men today. You have to be flexible. You have to be prepared to say it's a different world. If you are rigid and you are stuck, you've got to wake up, smell the coffee and say, no, I've got to work on myself to be better. If we look at boys and what boys need today, the younger version of men, well, boys need models and mentors. So they look at adults in their lives who are men. They look at their own dads, they look at their own uncles, their coaches, their teachers, and they need hugely models and mentors. I see this all the time with boys coming into me who are young or teenager and stuff like that, and they really need this. Why? Well, look at boys today. They go through experiences that we never even thought about. Like, just to mention 2, the whole area of violence, the whole area of porn, all those areas that we weren't familiar with, they are in the middle of this maelstrom of activity, okay? And they need modeling and mentoring big time from adult male figures. And then we talk about boys in activity. Boys in activity, they need the same stuff as we needed as boys, okay? They need discipline, certainly. But you have to realize that, for example, in adolescence, Boys need to risk and need to experiment. They need the dads, the uncles, the football coaches, so forth, like, to be really steady eddies, to be really rock solid in terms of what work have they done on themselves. Okay, I'm going to conclude by looking at what boys and men all look for. It comes down to a very human need, and the needs are the following. Am I cared and loved? We all need this. So as a man, if you don't feel that right now, hopefully these programs or you get help somewhere else will help you. If you have a sense of belonging, then you are well in the zone of feeling part of today's world as a man, and find you make a difference. You have to find that you make a difference in some form in your family, in your community, in your workplace. If not, it's time to change. Change is inviting, change is challenging. So we look at a lot of these in further detail and in greater depth as we go along. But for the moment, men and ladies who are watching, I thank you, and this is Jim Sheehy from reallyhuman.ie.
But I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put your blame on